Awaken your spirit chosen ones. Character isn't revealed when life applauds you. It's revealed when life tries to embarrass you. There's a moment in everyone's life where chaos knocks loudly, disrespect shows up uninvited, and the world expects a messy reaction. The script is familiar. Raise your voice, defend your ego, give them exactly what they're looking for. But then there are those rare moments when someone does the opposite, and it leaves everyone stunned. Not because they were passive, not because they were scared, but because they handled an ugly situation with a level of control that quietly rearranged the room. Here's a fact most people don't like to admit. Studies in behavioral psychology consistently show that emotional regulation under pressure is one of the strongest indicators of long-term leadership and influence. In simple terms, the people who stay grounded when things get ugly are the ones others instinctively trust with power. Not because they talk the loudest, but because they don't lose themselves when provoked. That kind of restraint is not accidental. It's trained, it's earned. And let's be honest, grace under pressure is not natural. Human instinct prefers chaos, sarcasm, and the perfectly rehearsed comeback you think of 3 hours later in the shower. So when someone responds with calm, precision, and dignity in the middle of nonsense, it short-circuits expectations. People don't just notice it, they replay it, over and over. How did they not lose it? Becomes the unspoken question hanging in the air. This isn't about being fake nice or pretending things don't hurt. It's about a deeper kind of power, the kind that doesn't need to prove itself, doesn't need an audience, and doesn't need permission. Today, we're breaking down exactly why the way you handled that ugly situation left people amazed, slightly uncomfortable, and secretly taking notes. Because power and grace, when used together, are impossible to ignore. Number 1. You refused to become what the situation demanded you be. The situation wanted a version of you that you've outgrown. It wanted noise, sharp words, ego, and a reaction that could be easily judged, replayed, and used against you. It wanted you emotional, defensive, and small enough to fit inside its chaos. And the most powerful thing you did was deny it that satisfaction. You didn't rise to the ugliness because you understood something most people learn too late. Not every invitation deserves your attendance. What made this moment different is that you felt everything. You weren't numb. You weren't disconnected. You were aware of the disrespect, the tension, the unfairness of it all. But instead of letting the moment shape you, you chose to shape your response. That takes strength people rarely acknowledge, because restraint doesn't look dramatic. It doesn't trend. It doesn't come with instant applause. But it leaves a lasting impression that noise never could. Most people don't realize how often situations try to negotiate your identity. They whisper, "This is who you need to be right now to survive this." Angry, bitter, petty, loud. You heard that whisper and said no. You understood that once you act out of character, even for a moment, you hand your power away. You become predictable, manageable, forgettable. You refused that trade. What stunned people wasn't just your calm, it was your consistency. They expected a crack, a slip, a moment where you'd abandon your values under pressure. Instead, you stayed aligned. That's rare. And rarity always draws attention. When someone can stand in an ugly moment and still choose integrity, it forces everyone watching to confront their own lack of control. You didn't walk away because you were weak. You walked away because you were anchored. You knew who you were before the situation started, and you made sure you were the same person when it ended. That kind of self-command can't be faked, and it can't be taught overnight. It's built quietly, choice by choice, until one day it shows up when it matters most. And that's why people were amazed, because you didn't just handle the situation, you mastered yourself. Number 2, You chose self-respect over public approval. When the situation got messy, the easiest thing would have been to perform for the crowd, to shout back, to make sure everyone knew exactly who was right and who was wrong. The temptation to prove yourself is universal. Humans are wired to seek approval, to collect nods and claps as proof that we belong, that we matter. But in that moment, you chose differently. You chose yourself over the applause, your dignity over the social scoreboard, and that's what separated you from everyone else. It wasn't about being proud or stubborn. It was about understanding that external approval is fleeting, often manipulative, and rarely worth the cost. The people watching aren't invested in your growth. They're invested in their entertainment, in seeing sparks fly, in the drama that validates their own insecurities. You recognize that performing for them would mean sacrificing your own integrity. You decided that you would rather stand alone with respect intact than win 1,000 fleeting nods at the expense of your own principles. This choice wasn't easy because it went against the most basic human instinct, the need to be liked. But real strength is doing what is right, not what is popular. While everyone else was scrambling for reactions, you were operating on a higher level. You acted like someone who understood that self-respect isn't negotiable and that anyone who tries to measure your worth has already failed to grasp it. By choosing self-respect, you rewrote the rules of the interaction. People noticed the difference immediately. It's subtle, but unmistakable. The way you held yourself, the way your calm radiated confidence, the quiet way you ended the situation without feeding into it. It left an impression far stronger than any loud argument ever could. The truth is, those who chase approval constantly remain tethered to the whims of others. You, on the other hand, were untethered. You proved that protecting your own value isn't selfish, it's powerful. And in that choice, people didn't just see someone handling a situation. They saw someone who refuses to compromise their worth, and that's a kind of authority that commands attention without saying a word. Number 3. You understood that reacting fast is usually reacting weak. In the heat of an ugly situation, the world pressures people to respond immediately, as if speed is a measure of strength. Most people rush to react because they feel that silence equals surrender, or that hesitation is a weakness. But what you did was different. You recognized that rushing is often the path to regret, that a fast reaction is usually an uncontrolled reaction, and that control is the true measure of power. You paused, assessed, and acted with intention rather than instinct, and that's what left everyone stunned. When emotions run high, the instinct is to defend, attack, or outshout the opposition. That's the default mode. It's what most people do, and it's why the aftermath of heated moments is often messy, filled with regret, and remembered more for mistakes than victories. You, however, understood the value of timing. You knew that a thoughtful response carries far more weight than an immediate one, and that the world often underestimates the power of someone who can wait calmly while everyone else is losing control. By holding back, you gained clarity. You didn't just react to what was happening in the moment. You saw the bigger picture. You noticed motives, patterns, and weaknesses that others were too busy shouting over to see. That calmness became a form of unspoken authority, a signal that you were operating on a level that the situation didn't expect. It made your eventual response feel deliberate, precise, and devastatingly effective without ever seeming aggressive. Reacting fast may give temporary satisfaction, but it rarely changes the narrative in your favor. You understood that true influence comes from measured action, not impulsive noise. By staying grounded, you turned the situation on its head. People expected chaos, and instead they witnessed control. That contrast alone commanded attention. You didn't just survive the moment. You orchestrated it without anyone realizing it. In that restraint, you displayed something rare, The kind of power that doesn't need to prove itself loudly because its strength is self-evident. Number 4. You didn't confuse being right with being wise. In the middle of that ugly situation, most people make a critical mistake. They equate being right with winning. They chase the argument, point out every flaw, and insist on proving themselves, as if correctness automatically commands respect. You didn't fall for that trap. You understood something few people ever grasp. Being right is temporary, but being wise shapes outcomes and leaves a lasting impression. That's what set you apart and made everyone stop and take notice. Being right is loud. It demands attention. It's immediate gratification. But wisdom is quiet, strategic, and often invisible at first. You could have escalated, shouted, and listed every grievance in perfect order. You could have won the debate but lost the room. Instead, you measured the consequences of your actions. You realized that proving a point often doesn't solve the problem. It only feeds ego and fuels the chaos. By choosing wisdom, you acted in a way that preserved your dignity while subtly guiding the situation toward resolution, or at least leaving it powerless to drag you down. There's a difference between being right and being effective, and you embodied that difference flawlessly. People often mistake aggression for authority, but authority comes from the ability to see beyond the moment, to act with foresight, and to influence outcomes without unnecessary conflict. You didn't need to dominate the conversation to control it. You didn't need to win an argument to win the respect of everyone watching. Your wisdom allowed you to rise above the noise, to operate on a level that others couldn't reach in their reactionary state. What made it even more remarkable was that you did this naturally. There was no performance, no calculated show of superiority. It was simply a choice rooted in clarity and experience. You let the situation unfold without letting it define you, and in that restraint you demonstrated a power that is rarely seen, the kind that doesn't need validation because it already knows its own strength. You didn't just handle the moment, you elevated it, proving that true influence comes from wisdom, not correctness. Number 5, you let people reveal themselves without interrupting the process. In that ugly situation, most people feel the urge to jump in, to intervene, to try and control how the story unfolds. They think they need to defend themselves or correct every misstep immediately. You didn't. You understood something that very few truly grasp. Sometimes the most powerful move is to step back and let people expose who they really are on their own. By doing nothing, you allowed the truth to rise naturally, and that alone changed the entire dynamic. It takes a rare kind of patience to watch someone unravel without feeling the need to react. The human instinct is to respond, to argue, to stop the embarrassing behavior, but you knew that interference would dilute the lesson. Every lie, every miscalculation, every attempt to manipulate or provoke became a mirror, reflecting exactly what was going on inside them. And the beauty of it is that by not interrupting, you avoided becoming part of the chaos. You remained outside of it, grounded, untouchable, and fully aware. What this does is subtle but profound. People rarely see it coming. They expect pushback, confrontation, or correction. When none comes, their own behavior is amplified, clearer, and far more revealing than any argument ever could. Observers notice this instinctively, even if they can't put it into words. They see the contrast between the controlled person standing quietly and the one unraveling in front of them, and it creates an almost magnetic attention. By letting the situation play out, you created a stage where the truth was undeniable. You didn't have to expose anyone or deliver a verdict. It happened naturally. And that's why people were amazed. They saw someone who didn't need to fight to be respected, someone who could let the world show its colors while maintaining their own. That kind of power is rare because it requires confidence, patience, and clarity. You proved that the strongest position isn't always the one that speaks first, but the one that lets others reveal themselves while you remain unshaken, fully in control, and impossible to manipulate. Number 6. You protected your future, not your feelings. When the situation was at its peak, most people would have acted purely on emotion. Hurt, anger, or embarrassment often drives decisions, and those choices are rarely kind to the long-term self. You didn't let that happen. You understood that a momentary release of feelings might feel satisfying now, but it could cost you everything meaningful later. You acted not for immediate comfort or validation, but for the future version of yourself who deserved better outcomes, respect, and freedom from regret. Protecting your future over your feelings requires a level of discipline that is almost invisible to those around you. Emotions scream for attention. They are loud, urgent, and convincing. Most people respond to them instinctively, then spend years cleaning up the consequences. You, however, recognized that the real victory isn't in feeling better instantly. It's in making a choice that keeps you strong, capable, and untouchable over time. That awareness changes everything. By prioritizing your future, you made decisions that weren't reactive but intentional. You didn't lash out. You didn't burn bridges you might later need to cross. You didn't let the chaos dictate the trajectory of your life. Instead, you acted with strategy, choosing actions and responses that preserved opportunities, reputation, and personal growth. The situation tried to lure you into temporary satisfaction, and you refused. That restraint alone communicates power because it's so rare. People often misunderstand patience as weakness, but in this case it was the exact opposite. Every choice you made in that moment sent a message. You are thinking ahead, you are in control, and nothing will force you to compromise what matters most. You didn't just survive the situation, you ensured it couldn't harm your path forward. What most fail to see is that the ability to prioritize future stability over present emotion separates those who are truly strong from those who are merely loud. You proved it decisively. Your actions weren't for the applause or the temporary satisfaction of being understood. They were for the person you are becoming. That's the kind of power that leaves people in awe, because it's the kind that no one can take from you. Number 7. You recognized that dignity is louder than defense. When the situation turned ugly, most people feel compelled to defend themselves loudly, to justify every move, and to make sure everyone understands exactly who they are. It's instinctual. It feels necessary. But you did something radically different. You let dignity speak for you. You understood that dignity doesn't need an explanation, a performance, or validation from others. It carries a weight that commands respect without ever raising its voice. That realization completely changed how the interaction unfolded. Dignity is subtle, but it's more impactful than any argument, retort, or comeback. When you refuse to engage in the petty exchanges that most people get caught in, you immediately elevate yourself above the chaos. People notice it instinctively. They sense that you aren't reacting to be seen or heard. You are reacting because it aligns with your principles. There's a quiet authority in that, a kind of power that is almost magnetic, because it signals control, self-awareness, and unshakable self-worth. Most people misunderstand silence or composure as weakness, but you demonstrated that the true force is in how you hold yourself, when everyone else is scrambling to prove something. You didn't need to defend yourself with words, because your posture, choices, and restraint were already doing it. Every move you made radiated confidence and integrity, showing that your identity doesn't rely on others' approval. By prioritizing dignity over defense, you also created a subtle but undeniable psychological effect on everyone around you. The ones trying to provoke you were caught off guard. They expected reaction. They expected noise. and when they didn't get it, their power over the situation evaporated. Meanwhile, observers were drawn to you, not because you argued better, but because you showed a strength that doesn't shout. It exists independently of recognition. In that moment, you proved something most people never fully grasp. The loudest defense rarely wins, but unshakable dignity does. You didn't just handle the situation, you redefined the rules of engagement. By embodying dignity, you became untouchable in a way that words could never achieve. Number 8, you refused to perform pain for sympathy. When the situation turned ugly, most people feel the urge to dramatize their hurt, to wear their pain like a badge, hoping that others will notice, feel sorry, or take their side. It's a common instinct. Pain is heavy, and when it's visible, it demands attention. You didn't fall for it. You felt the impact, you processed it, but you refused to turn it into a performance for anyone else. That alone set you apart and made the entire moment remarkable. Refusing to perform pain isn't about suppressing emotion. It's about controlling the narrative of your own life. You understood that displaying suffering for the sake of validation often backfires. It feeds gossip, invites manipulation, and gives power to the very people who caused it. Instead of seeking temporary comfort from others' reactions, you managed your emotions internally, keeping your energy focused on what truly mattered, your dignity, your clarity, and your next steps. That level of self-command is rare and quietly intimidating. By not performing your pain, you allowed the situation to reveal itself fully without interference. Those who expected you to crumble were left frustrated because their expectations failed. Your composure became a mirror, reflecting back their lack of control and making the absurdity of the moment impossible to ignore. Observers couldn't help but notice the stark contrast between your quiet strength and the chaos surrounding you. There's a subtle power in experiencing pain privately. It builds resilience, sharpens judgment, and ensures that your response is strategic rather than impulsive. People who perform their pain often trap themselves in it. They become defined by the moment instead of rising above it. You avoided that trap. You allowed the experience to strengthen you, not define you. In the end, your refusal to dramatize suffering communicated far more than words ever could. It showed maturity, control, and an unshakable confidence that no one could exploit. You didn't just survive the situation, you elevated it, proving that true strength lies in internal mastery rather than external sympathy. Your silence in pain wasn't weakness, it was an undeniable statement of power. Number 9, you didn't outsource your behavior to someone else's disrespect. In that heated moment, most people instinctively let someone else's actions dictate theirs. When confronted with rudeness, aggression, or manipulation, it's easy to react by matching it, proving yourself, or defending your ego. That's the trap most fall into. You didn't. You took full responsibility for your behavior, refusing to hand over control of your actions to anyone else. That choice alone elevated you above the chaos and made your response unforgettable. Refusing to outsource your behavior is about ownership. You understood that no one can truly force you to act in a way that compromises your values unless you allow it. The moment could have triggered anger, retaliation, or impulsive words, but you consciously decided to respond on your own terms. You recognized that letting someone else's disrespect determine your actions is essentially giving them power over your character, and you weren't willing to surrender that control. By staying grounded and self-directed, you not only protected your integrity, but also shifted the dynamics of the entire situation. People who were trying to provoke you realized their usual tactics didn't work. The ones observing noticed a striking difference. While others might have spiraled into defensiveness or drama, You operated with precision and calm, fully aware that your behavior was your own and not a reactionary performance dictated by someone else. This level of self-command is rare because it requires constant awareness. You have to recognize the triggers, resist the pull of instinctive reactions, and stay rooted in your values while chaos swirls around you. Most people fail because it's uncomfortable to maintain control in moments that demand it most. You, however, treated it like a discipline, not a choice. By owning your actions completely, you demonstrated a type of power that is invisible but undeniable. You didn't just respond, you controlled the narrative of your own behavior. In doing so, you proved that true strength isn't about overpowering others or retaliating. It's about refusing to let anyone else dictate the way you exist in the world. That's a form of authority few ever achieve, and you displayed it flawlessly. Number 10. You understood that composure is not weakness. It's discipline. In the middle of chaos, most people mistake calm for passivity or indifference. They think if someone isn't shouting, reacting, or proving a point, they must be weak or uninvolved. You proved exactly the opposite. You understood that staying composed in an ugly situation isn't about pretending nothing matters. It's about exercising control over yourself when everything around you is trying to pull you off balance. That is discipline, and discipline is a power most people never learn to master. Composure isn't natural for most. When provoked, the instinct is to react immediately, to let adrenaline dictate your words and actions. It feels satisfying in the short term, but it rarely serves the bigger picture. You knew this and made a conscious choice to stay grounded. Your calm wasn't indifference. It was strategy. Every gesture, every pause, every word or absence of it was intentional. By maintaining your composure, you set the tone of the situation, controlling what could have easily become chaos without raising your voice. What made your response remarkable is how it shifted perception. The people trying to stir conflict expected heat, not steadiness. When they were met with unwavering control, their efforts faltered. Observers noticed the contrast immediately: chaos versus calm, impulsive versus disciplined. That contrast didn't just impress, it commanded respect. People instinctively recognize strength that doesn't need to prove itself. Discipline in moments of pressure also signals self-mastery. It shows that you are not a product of circumstance, that you answer to your own principles, not the whims of the situation. That awareness alone can transform a moment from a battle into a display of authority. By treating composure as discipline rather than weakness, you didn't just handle the situation, you elevated it. You demonstrated that true strength isn't loud, reactive, or visible in gestures of aggression. It exists quietly, internally, and reveals itself when others are losing control. That kind of calm is magnetic, unforgettable, and impossible to challenge. You proved that discipline is the silent engine of power, and everyone watching couldn't help but take notice. Number 11. You walked away without turning it into a moral lecture. In most messy situations, people feel compelled to justify themselves, explain every action, and deliver a statement that proves their moral high ground. They craft speeches, point out flaws, and try to make sure everyone understands the truth from their perspective. You didn't do that. You understood that walking away without turning it into a moral lecture is one of the most powerful acts someone can perform. It signals strength, clarity, and an unshakable sense of self that words alone could never convey. Walking away is more than leaving a situation physically. It's refusing to be dragged into battles that don't serve your growth or your integrity. By not lecturing, you avoided the trap of proving your righteousness, which almost always benefits the other side more than it benefits you. Most people mistake silence or exit for weakness, but in reality, it is a form of authority. It shows that your time, energy, and focus are not negotiable, and that you operate on your own standards rather than being pulled into someone else's drama. There is also an elegance in leaving without explanation. It forces the other side to confront themselves without your commentary guiding them. They are left with their own contradictions, their own behavior, and their own failure to control the narrative. Observers notice it instinctively. They see the person who remains unshaken and the person who can't control themselves. That contrast alone leaves a lasting impression, far stronger than any speech or argument could. Walking away without moralizing is also a statement of self-respect. You chose to protect your energy, your dignity, and your focus rather than trade it for temporary validation. It demonstrates that your actions are rooted in purpose, not reaction. People rarely forget it when someone can leave a messy situation completely untangled and unshaken. You didn't just end the encounter, you transformed it. By refusing to turn it into a lecture, you turned your exit into a display of power and control, one that communicates more than words ever could. It's a level of strength and awareness that leaves everyone watching quietly amazed. Number 12. You didn't need closure from people who caused the damage. When something ugly happens, most people instinctively chase closure. They want explanations, apologies, or at least some acknowledgement that the wrong they experienced is recognized. It feels like a necessary step to move on. You didn't fall for that trap. You understood that waiting for closure from those who caused the damage is a gamble at best and a surrender at worst. You took the power back by creating your own closure, on your own terms. Not needing closure is about independence. It's about recognizing that other people's words, actions, or acknowledgement are not prerequisites for your peace. You didn't allow someone else's refusal, denial, or manipulation to dictate how you process the situation or dictate the timeline of your recovery. By taking responsibility for your own sense of resolution, you removed their influence entirely. That's a kind of power that is rarely seen but deeply felt by anyone paying attention. Most people who chase closure end up stuck. They replay conversations in their head, obsess over motives, or wait for the right apology that might never come. You bypassed that cycle entirely. You didn't need validation, explanation, or recognition to move forward. You decided your peace and your understanding of the situation mattered more than anyone else's input. That choice alone made the damage lose its grip on you. There's also a psychological edge in not needing closure. It removes leverage from anyone who thinks they can control you through guilt, manipulation, or lingering tension. By stepping away mentally and emotionally, you took the narrative into your hands. Observers notice it. There's an unmistakable calm in someone who doesn't need anyone else's permission to feel whole, and that calm carries authority. You didn't just survive the situation, you neutralized it. By refusing to rely on closure from others, you proved that your growth, peace, and strength are self-generated. You turned what could have been a lingering wound into a demonstration of independence and unshakable control. That is the kind of presence that leaves everyone silently impressed, and often quietly intimidated. Number 13. You allowed growth to matter more than revenge. In moments of conflict, most people instinctively think about payback. When someone hurts you, embarrasses you, or tries to undermine you, the first reaction is often to retaliate, to make them feel the same pain, to even the score. You didn't follow that path. You understood something that is rare and transformative. Revenge is temporary, but growth lasts a lifetime. You chose to invest in yourself rather than in proving a point, and that choice turned a messy situation into a moment of power. Choosing growth over revenge requires incredible foresight. Revenge is loud, dramatic, and satisfying in the short term, but it rarely changes the reality of the situation or elevates the person delivering it. Growth, on the other hand, is quiet, deliberate, and lasting. By focusing on your own development, you ensured that the experience strengthened you rather than consumed you. Every insult, every provocation, every ugly moment became an opportunity to learn, to refine your judgment, and to sharpen your sense of self. What made your approach remarkable is that it left everyone watching stunned. They expected retaliation, an emotional eruption, or a public showdown. Instead, they saw someone who wasn't tethered to petty grievances, someone whose focus was higher than the moment's drama. That level of self-mastery is magnetic. People instinctively respect someone who doesn't stoop to fight every battle, but rises above it with strategy, patience, and awareness. By prioritizing growth, you also reclaimed control of your narrative. You refused to let someone else's negativity dictate your behavior, your energy, or your trajectory. Every action, every decision after the incident reinforced the message that your progress mattered more than anyone's judgment or attempt to harm you. In the end, your choice demonstrated a rare form of power, the ability to transform conflict into development, pain into insight, and chaos into clarity. You didn't just survive the situation, you used it to evolve, proving that true strength is measured not by how forcefully you strike back, but by how much you rise above. Growth became your silent, undeniable victory. Number 14. You proved that real power is self-governance. In that ugly situation, most people are quick to believe that power comes from dominating others, winning arguments, or forcing respect. You shattered that misconception completely. You showed that the truest form of power doesn't come from external victories. It comes from mastering yourself, controlling your impulses, and making decisions that align with your values, regardless of the chaos around you. That is self-governance, and it is far rarer and more formidable than anyone giving you authority. Self-governance is about refusing to be a puppet to emotion, ego, or circumstance. You didn't let anger dictate your words, you didn't let fear dictate your choices, and you didn't let pride dictate your actions. Every response you made was deliberate, measured, and rooted in who you are, not who someone else wanted you to be in that moment. While others were reacting, debating, or performing for attention, you remained steady. That calm, controlled presence immediately shifted the energy of the situation and drew attention without needing a single shout. What makes self-governance so powerful is its invisibility. It doesn't announce itself, but it is unmistakable. People can feel it, even if they can't articulate it. They notice that no one can push you into chaos, manipulate you into submission, or provoke you into weakness. That silent authority creates a gravitational pull around you. It commands respect without demanding it. By mastering your own behavior, you also took control of the narrative. No one else's actions or words could define you. You decided the tone, the limits, and the outcome of your experience. That choice turned a potentially messy encounter into a demonstration of unmatched strength. In the end, you didn't just handle the situation. You transformed it into proof that true power is internal, not external. It isn't about defeating someone else. It's about defeating the impulse to lose yourself. By governing yourself, you set a standard that no one could challenge, showing that the person in full command of themselves is unstoppable. That is the essence of real power, and you displayed it flawlessly. The moments we face that test our patience, character, and resolve often feel unbearable while we're living them. Yet, how we respond defines not only the situation, but who we become because of it. Throughout this journey, you showed something rare, a mastery over yourself that goes beyond clever words, quick comebacks, or public recognition. You refused to become what the situation demanded, prioritized self-respect over approval, and understood that reacting fast is usually reacting weak. You didn't confuse being right with being wise. You let people reveal themselves without interference, and you protected your future rather than surrendering to temporary emotions. You embodied dignity over defense, refused to perform pain for sympathy, and took full responsibility for your behavior without outsourcing it to anyone else's disrespect. You demonstrated that composure is discipline, that walking away without moralizing carries more weight than any speech, and that closure is something you create for yourself, not something you wait for from others. You valued growth over revenge, and above all, proved that real power lives in self-governance. Every choice, every pause, every silent assertion of your principles built an invisible authority that no one could challenge, a presence that commands respect without shouting for it. The lessons here are simple in words but profound in practice. Strength is quiet, control is deliberate, and integrity is non-negotiable. The true power comes from mastering yourself, not from dominating others or winning temporary battles. What you did wasn't just handling a situation, it was an exhibition of inner power, a blueprint for navigating life with grace and authority when everyone else expects chaos. If this breakdown inspired you or opened your eyes to a new way of handling challenges, make sure to show some love. Hit that subscribe button for more insights, drop a comment sharing your thoughts or experiences, and share this with someone who needs to see how power and grace really work in action. Don't just watch, engage, grow, and let this wisdom shape the way you handle your own moments of pressure. Stay awakened, chosen ones.